actually see everything until right at 11:30.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
But it says you're live, so you may be.
Andy, be polite.
Thanks for I always need a reminder.
So just don't say anything inappropriate right now. Just in case. Not that you would anyway, but
This is true.
well, it's nice to meet you both. I'm
Thank you for
gonna
your
step
help.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Would love to catch up with you later. But hope you can join us at the happy hour on at 3 o'clock if you can. That's great. Got some good giveaways and other things that we're gonna do. So, but I know you're busy, so hope the session goes well, and I'll just
Thank you
be
so
here in
much.
the background.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much, David.
Bye bye.
Bye. Oh, so I see. If you go to people, is that everybody in our session?
Yeah, so I asked
Very cool.
David's still there.
Yeah, some of those are people who are registered, and then some of them are just people who have access to your session because they're admins. So it's just showing them as has access. So like Judy's in there and several others like Bart and Alice and Candace and Jane. But that doesn't mean they're actually in the session yet. So
Okay. Learning experience for all. Oh, we are starting to get hellos and good morning. Hello, Johanna. We'll be starting our session in just a couple more minutes. Okay, we're live.
It's exciting.
That
We
must
did
mean
it.
that it's exactly 11:30. Look at that. I think we still need to give a minute or so for people to come on in. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I think another minute would be good. And as people are coming in, welcome. And we have just a quick little prompt in the chat. If you don't mind, tell us who's in the room and where you're from. It'd be very helpful. Those who are in the room as well, we included a bit.ly into the chat for you to access our slide deck. See people popping on. Hello, Jennifer.
Morning, Jack.
Welcome.
We have New Jersey and we have Georgia.
Rachel, good
Welcome,
morning.
Rachel.
Welcome.
Alabama.
Right.
Beyond
Flying in here. Texas. This is great.
all over the place. Lots of Texas. El Paso, San Antonio. New Jersey and Atlanta.
A distant cousin in New Jersey. Last name Anderson.
Oh, right. Same last names.
This is great. Awesome.
Florida. Welcome, everyone. This is so different than being in person. Wish we could see all of your faces and say hello in person.
Next year. We will see them next year.
That's correct.
Awesome. What do you think? It's just
Yeah,
after
you want to get
11:30.
started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend an hour with us. My name is Dr. Paula Dillon. I am the assistant superintendent in a public school district in Rhode Island called Barrington. And this is
Yeah. So my name is Andrew Anderson. I'm the principal of Barrington Middle School, which is in Barrington, Rhode Island. We have 850 students, about 100 faculty and staff. There's some of our Twitter handles there at BPSRI, at BMSRI, and follow along at hashtag BMS Shines, BPS Empowers.
I'm going to put up a slide that has the way that you can access our slide deck. It's a Google Doc that we've turned into a Pear Deck. We're gonna do some experimenting here to see if we can be interactive with you during this session as much as possible. So on this slide that you see here, there's a bit.ly that will allow you to access the slide deck. And the slide deck actually is a Pear Deck in Google so that you can engage with us. And then there is our 7-step logic model, which is the reason why we're here. So there is as well as our contact information. So if you would like to connect with us beyond this conference, we would love to hear from you and to do that. Just to set the stage for the agenda, we're going to take some time to introduce what we're doing, what our purpose of being here is. We have changed, really talk about how we're using this model, this logic model in a time of COVID, designing with students at the center and using kind of an empathy approach to design thinking for COVID. So we'll go through that and we'll kind of show you how to use that as the majority of our time here. So why are we here and what are we going to focus on as a model or exemplar as we go through our logic model? We really fundamentally believe in the power of deep learning competencies, experiential learning, personalized opportunities through project-based or problem-based learning. And so we had established a pretty strong program, and we have used our logic model in order to establish that. Not only that, we have been able to use that model to bring our district and our schools really to the forefront of what's happening in terms of personalized and student-centered learning. You're not seeing the slides change, Andy?
No.
You
I'm
don't see
still
the
seeing
slides?
it being on the bit.ly. Yeah, the bit.ly one.
Can anyone else see it changing? Because I see it changing on both my screen and in the slide deck. Andy, I wonder if you're just kind of behind a minute. Do you see it now? Oh, Andy's gone. And he's back. Okay, so sorry about the technology. I really do apologize for that. So that was really our why. And so when COVID happened and we had to go to distance learning in the spring and really rethink our models of education for the fall, we pulled out that logic model and said, we don't want to lose these things. We don't want to lose experiential learning. We don't want to lose a student-centered focus. We don't want to lose our focus on the deep learning competencies. And how can we design and think differently, reimagine, rethink differently so that moving forward in a time of COVID, our students are still able to engage with us in the ways that we were able to when we were able to be more in person and more collaborative in smaller settings. Andy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Nope, you go right ahead. Good.
So that brings us to this video that really kind of speaks to our why, our passion, what we want for our students. And we thought we'd just take a second to show you a piece of that. And please let me know if we can't see this. And then we're going to start using a coaching model to demonstrate how you could use the logic model in your own setting to get from where you are currently to where you'd like to be, whether it's in a time of COVID or in a more normalized learning environment. Is it showing, Andy?
Imagine the awesomest thing
You don't
can,
see it, do you?
like an automatic grilled cheese maker, or a time machine, or a time machine with an automatic grilled cheese maker.
Do you
Now
see it?
imagine who's going to invent it. Him?
I don't.
Glasses here?
I just hear it.
Okay. I do apologize for that technology. Let's move to the next slide. You all have access to that video in the slide deck that's been shared with you. I encourage you to look at it. It's just inspirational. It's our why. We believe that our students are the key to the future. We believe that they are our problem solvers, that we need to open the path for them to have opportunity for inquiry, for them to dive deep, for them to be able to become critical thinkers. And we believe that in order for us to do that, we need to rethink, reimagine, and redesign education to allow for that space, whether we're in a distance learning, hybrid, or in-person model. So we have our first, Pear Deck slide here. On your slide, you should be able to click on the bottom, and there are multiple choice questions. And when you click on the bottom, we should be able to see the results of how you're clicking. So I would love for you to have the opportunity to go ahead and do that. And let me make that bigger for you. So is everyone able to interact with the slide by clicking on the pair at the bottom? Andy, I don't think it's working for them.
Maybe they can write it right in the chat. So what is the most important resource a student has
Yeah.
in school?
Yeah, but let's use the chat for that. Oh, so unfortunate.
Just take a moment and respond to that question. What is the most important resource a student has in school? All right, here we go. So teachers. Another one for teachers. Educators.
Absolutely. This crowd is right on top of things. The MET project, which was done by the Melinda and the Bill Gates Foundation, did a huge study on the effectiveness of what has the most impact or highest impact on student learning. And John Haiti did a similar meta-analysis, and absolutely highly effective teachers is by far the resource that has the greatest impact on student achievement. And so with that in mind, we started to think about, what does that mean? 91% of children in America attend public schools, which are neighborhood schools. What are the resources in those communities that are assets that can be brought into the classroom that can allow our students to see all of the assets that they have as learners and how we can celebrate them? Unfortunately, 43 million Americans live below the poverty line, and many of the neighborhoods that we're working with are concentrations of poverty. So what we're seeing is this huge achievement gap in many schools, and those achievement gaps are not closing. At the same time, we're seeing this focus on deficits. We're constantly talking about what students don't have, and we're focusing in that in such a way that the opportunity gap is growing bigger because we're disengaging our students. We believe that if we engage our students through experiential project-based learning or deep learning, that those disconnected from school will become engaged, and engaged in a way that they are building the tools to improve their school community, their larger community, the world around them, that they become the change. And that we're giving them the tools to experience the world from that inquiry-based lens, and celebrating the tools that they bring to us to attack each of these problems that we're seeing, including COVID. So deep learning is our guidepost. We believe to foster deep learning so that all learners contribute to a common good, address global challenges, and flourish in a complex world. We believe that if we want learners who can thrive in turbulent and complex times, apply new thinking to situations, and change the world, then we must imagine learning. This comes from NPDL Global, which, if you're aware of Dr. Michael Fullan's work, he has really taken a lot of research and a lot of time and networks between countries and school districts across the world to really look at how we engage students and how we use that engagement to allow for rigor, relevance, and relationships to build in a positive way. So I want to ask you a question, and we will have you place it into the chat box because we know that that's going to work. How has what we learned about distance and hybrid learning set the stage for us to reimagine education? When we come out on the other side of COVID, what are the things that we have learned that we really want to keep, that we have learned, or what are the barriers that have been removed for us that we want to have removed forever, permanently? What policies have been getting in our way that are no longer there, that are not blocking our ability to engage our students? Think about those questions and let us see what you're thinking in the chat. Am I frozen?
Nope, I hear you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure because I can't see your face anymore. So Andy, well, the people in the audience are thinking about that question. I'm gonna turn it on to you. So Pauline Anderson mentions that technology can be a most important resource for differentiation. Yes, and one of the things that we've seen is that there is a huge divide, an equity divide, between students who have access to that technology and the Wi-Fi needed to run that technology and those that don't. Lots of people are talking about the importance of technology. What are some of the other things that we are learning about hybrid and distance in terms of student engagement. So we're seeing engagement through technology. What else? Yes, the need for professional learning for both teachers and students around how to use technology effectively. And we've shown you some bad examples of how to use technology effectively this morning.
Right. For me, if I were to ask this question as being the principal of my school, I think social emotional learning is something that has really, really risen to the top, and the importance of social emotional learning right now.
Yeah.
I'll add it to the chat.
One of the other things that I've noticed is that there are some policies that we don't have to follow, right? This idea that seat time equates to deep learning, and that's how we move our students on. But we're really seeing that when we allow students to engage differently and show their learning through multiple modalities, that we're seeing tremendous performance and thinking, and we're actually making their learning even more visible than when we were using more traditional assessment types. PD and support for parents and guardians, yeah. One of the things that I've also noticed with that, Pauline, is that right now we're opening our classrooms. Parents can see into our classrooms. They can see how our teachers are teaching and how their students are engaging with that learning. But they're also able to get to our opportunities for parent engagement more. We're seeing a huge increase in the number of parents that are able to come into our meetings and engage with us. We didn't see that before. I think we need to keep that going even when we are able to meet in person, so parents who couldn't come in or access these opportunities continue to be able to access them.
Right. And I love Anita's point too there.
Across districts. Yeah, I love that. Outside of the walls, moving outside. Yeah, going outside of the walls and then bringing things in through the technology that you haven't been able to. Our students are all over the world. They're going to, all of these different countries and interacting with experts and different students from different cultures and different countries. Absolutely. So I think we tend to be looking right now at, oh my goodness, these very bad experiences and barriers and all of the scary aspects of COVID. But I think this is an opportunity for us to step back and say, things have not been 100% terrific with education before COVID. What are we learning now? How do we want to rethink, reimagine, and redesign education when we come out on the other side of this? Do we want to have it look the same as it was before? Or do we want it to be very different based upon what we know from before and what we know from now? I think an important point is we see that there are like 3 groups of students. Those who are like excelling with this virtual learning, those who are really struggling and did much better in person, but then we have another group that didn't do well in either situation. So as we're redesigning and reimagining and rethinking, how do we engage all 3 groups in a way that is beneficial to them and centers on them? And use this as a learning opportunity to recreate. Okay, which brings us to our 7 steps. And this is the purpose. This is the why of the 7 steps, right? So we've been asking ourselves these questions before COVID and now during COVID. And those questions are, what is our mission and our vision? Are we hitting that? Is it the right mission and vision? Who do we have at the table that's telling us that we're on the right direction? And how do we move forward to make the changes that we're seeing as evident or as needed or as necessary? And so that's what we want to walk through now. Originally, when we were going to be in person, we were going to have you workshop this. So in this setting, we're actually going to use Andy as a coaching model. So we have not practiced this on purpose. We want you to see in live kind of setting what this might look like. And so I'm going to put Andy on the spot. He's going to be on the hot seat, and he's going to have to answer some difficult questions as we move through the 7 steps. Any questions? Okay. You ready, Andy?
I'm ready. Before I get on the hot seat here, I think that's perfect if you just keep it right in this slide. What would be really, really great and really helpful is as you know, I'm being coached by Paula. If you think of your own context and think about whether it's a district or school or classroom, is what are the problems that you're currently facing? So what is the problem of practice you are facing as a result of COVID? And kind of think about the questions that I'm being asked, but relate it to your own context. And then again, in this slide deck, you're going to have a copy of this logic model tool that you can bring back to your school and your setting, and you can work through the steps with whoever's on your instructional leadership team.
Yes. And so I'm going to ask Andy this question, but I would love for you to put in the chat what problem of practice you're facing as a result of COVID. So Andy, well, they're thinking about what problem of practice they're facing. What's the problem of practice that you are facing or were facing as a result of COVID at the middle school?
Yeah, so I think when I'm thinking about this current problem practice and thinking about where we've come as a school, and to set just a little context, last fall, a year ago, this past August, we opened up a brand new middle school, and the brand new middle school was built on the deep learning principles of communication and collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, character, and citizenship. So every facet of the school building was designed to foster those deep learning principles. We had breakout spaces, we had furniture that could be reconfigured, we had walls that opened up and closed, we had amazing technology. So the problem of practice that we're currently facing right now as a school is how do we maximize those deep learning principles in a time of such restrictions with COVID and those parameters that we that we have to have with just to make sure that we're keeping our students safe and our teachers safe. So I would say that would be the problem in practices is how can we maximize our building? How can we get to those deep learning principles during these times with these parameters? Unfortunately, Paul,
I was mute.
Okay, all right, I guess here.
I pulled up the vision of the middle school, which is the vision of the district, just to kind of set the stage. So the current mission is to empower all students to excel in character, citizenship, collaboration, creativity, communication, and critical thinking, so that they may positively impact the future. And then below that, our vision talks about the characteristics of a graduate or a student: resilience, empathy, engagement in experiential and passion-based learning, transfer of skills, characteristics of a leader, strong research and computational thinking skills, and seeks opportunities to give back to the community. So given this current vision, what I'm hearing is that you were struggling to make these things happen with so many of the restrictions under the learning models that we were facing.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So we just kind of reviewed the current mission and vision, but that current mission and vision was created in a non-COVID time. So let's think about what was the current context that you were facing at the start of the school year, or even last spring, when it came to the elements you were trying to accomplish with the vision and mission.
Yeah, I mean, so last spring meaning pre-COVID or during COVID? During COVID. Yeah. So our current context was, well, even now, is that we have students that are on multiple learning models. So we have students that are full distance, we have students that are hybrid, so they're 2 days a week they're in person and 2 days they're in distance, and then we have students who are 5 days a week. Those are our sixth graders who are in pods, and those are our students with IEPs or specific plans. So we also have restrictions on how many students can be in one space at one time, and restrictions on how many people can be in the school or visit in the classroom. Fortunately, with in our district, students do have technology. Every student has a device. Every student in their school has a device. So that could be used as a leveraging point there. And I think too is with regards to instructional practices, is our teachers how to make some decisions of slowing down, of identifying priority kind of standards, and knowing that time, that they didn't have the luxury of the time and the flexibility of our schedule like they've had in the past.
So let's talk about the teachers, right? So you talked about these multiple learning models. Does each teacher own one model, or are they doing all three models?
Teachers are doing all three models at once. So we have teachers we have students that in a classroom that could be full distance learners, and they're zooming into the class. Our teachers have cameras, and they're following along instruction as they were sitting in class, but they're sitting in the safety and comfort of their own home. And then we have students that are in that same class that are actually physically in front of the students. Learning is on a continuum, so it's not like they repeat what they did on Tuesday and Wednesday to the Thursday, Friday group. Instruction happens Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it continues Thursday and Friday following scope and sequence.
Okay, and then so you mentioned that one of the COVID challenge that you wanted to tackle was how do you continue to have students engage in experiential and project-based learning in a time of COVID? So right. During this early COVID time, was that happening in your current context?
Not.
Or was it a struggle?
It was definitely. I think it was definitely a struggle of for the past 3, 4, 5 years. Our teachers have been coached on developing project-based learning opportunities with the deep learning principles. So the way that it was done cannot be done now. So it's just trying to find the time and make sense of how it can happen during these parameters.
So Andy, we just did this current context, vision, and mission with you relatively quickly. Can you tell everyone what this actually looked like in reality when we were doing it in the district? Yeah.
Yep. So what we would be doing is we would be bringing this back to our instructional leadership team. We would be making sure that we would have the stakeholders around the table, the curriculum chairs, teachers, students. Student voice is so important, and parents, and working through and getting multiple perspectives, just not being one dimensional. All of this should be done right within instructional leadership team.
Okay, so you finished step 1, and you identified kind of your current context, and you had your current vision and mission up and running. Then you took a step back, and as a leadership team, you went through this plus minus delta process. And in a plus minus delta, you look at your problem of practice and you ask yourself, what's going well? What's the plus in my problem of practice? What's already working? And then you ask yourself, what's not working so much, what's getting in the way of me reaching a solution to that problem? And then the delta, what are some potential solutions to that problem? So this is kind of a brainstorming method that we use often. Our students use plus minus delta as well when they're stuck and working through problems. So we use this as an entire learning community, both as leaders, teachers, and then we also train our students to use it as well. So Andy, in the start of this, what was going well, if anything?
Yeah, and I think some of the questions that we asked our participants a few moments ago, technology, right? So that was that definitely is a positive leverage point where all our students, all our teachers have current, effective, efficient technology that's in place. I think one is in a community. The community is overwhelmingly supportive of students engaging and coming to school. Definitely, they've been really positively overwhelmed by the commitment of the teachers and the experiences that they're trying to bring to their students. So so parental support is there. I think one other a positive is we also simultaneously have switched our student platform. Canvas is a platform that our district is using, really, but our school is using, where that's kind of that one-stop shop for our students, so they're not accessing all different places everywhere, which I think that Canvas could be, as I'm thinking about it right now, a really useful tool for a leveraging point for kind of PBL and experiential learning.
So what wasn't going so well?
In the beginning, and still, it's I would say knowing how to balance between the different learning models that are happening simultaneously. Not that it's not necessarily going well. That was a steep learning curve, and that took time, and it's still taking time of how to instruct the students that are, full distance and in person, and the ones that are coming in out of distance and in person due to being on quarantine, or unfortunately maybe getting sick themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were you seeing much PBL and EXL experiential learning going on at the start?
Not as much. We actually saw, so this would be a positive. We actually saw a lot of SEL, social emotional learning, at the start of our school year, and that continues, the importance of building relationships.
So as you and your team looked at this plus and this minus, what were some things that you initially thought about shifting or changing?
As a leadership team, one thing that we started to, and really that term reimagine that you talked about, is reimagine what it could look like during this COVID times, and looking at some of the projects that we built down in the past, and seeing how they can kind of shift and morph, with the parameters that we have.
I'm going to pause here, Andy, and see if there are any questions from the people who are in the room before we move on. Are you able to see the chat?
Yep, I can see the chat.
Any questions yet?
I'm
not seeing any yet.
Oh, yeah.
You got one?
So, taking my hat off as the person that's being coached this, so far we've kind of walked through 2 steps of our project model. The first is, what is your current reality? What is your current context, and the current and what is your current mission vision? And now the second step that we're walking through is what's working well, what's not, and there's some possible changes. And kind of culture a little bit is we're thinking about how can we start to leverage some of these positives that are already happening, and think how can we put these changes into place.
Yeah, exactly. So Andy, you talked about what your current context was, and then you went through what was working, what wasn't, some ideas that your leadership had early on about how to shift that. When you did that, and when you had that conversation, then your next step was to say, okay, these are the shifts that we see as potential. And you had to rethink what your desired context would be, your desired reality in this 3-model learning program. So what was your desired context in the 3 models of learning in terms of experiential learning and problem-based learning? What did you come up with as a team?
So I would say that technology being kind of the focal point, and how can leveraging technology, using technology as a tool of getting to those deep learning levels, so that are really the foundation of project-based learning. So instead of kids physically being in the same space connecting with each other, how can we leverage technology and platform for students to be communicating and collaborating with one another? The desired context is leveraging the technology for students to be connecting with the outside world. So whether they're expertise in the communities, whether they're other classrooms, whether they're in the elementary or the high school, and even in higher ed in the industry, of engaging in that kind of experiential project-based learning piece. And then also kind of leveraging technology, with the project-based learning. One of the tenets of that is having a product, having a tangible product. So what does that tangible product look like with technology? So still kind of reimagining the tangible side of PBL, but how does it live in the technological world?
So I have that three uses of technology, because that was a positive that you had access to. So that was using it to get to the deep learning competencies that are the foundations of experiential learning and project-based learning, for students to be able to engage with and collaborate with the outside world, other schools, higher ed, experts, field trips, and leveraging technology to create and solve and publish. Did I capture everything?
Yeah, I think that's spot on.
And then when you went back and you looked at the vision and mission of the school and the district, did you feel that it needed to be changed, or were you still saying that that's the right vision, we just stopped working toward it as we had a COVID pause?
Yeah. So
put that back on the screen.
Yeah. So this has definitely been, I think our mission and our vision of Evergraduate has been tested, but what we're finding is it's standing the test of time. Although context can kind of shift and merge, but I feel like it's very much relevant to where we are. And as you're typing that, I'm going to take off my hat for a second of being coach. There's a question from, did your team answer this individually and then come together, or collaborate and answer together? So that's at Barrington Middle School, we have something called our BMS Leadership Council. And our BMS Leadership Council, there's a representatives from each grade, each department, and we're a middle school model, so we have a teaming model. And we call our teams clusters. So there's 3 clusters in each grade. So we have a rep from each cluster. And these are the questions that we kind of work through and are currently working through. So this is like ongoing dialogue. But yeah, we do it not individually, but we do it as a team. And one of our steps, which you'll see in just a few moments, is all about stakeholders and who's at the table and who should be at the table. But to answer your question, Johanna, this is something that we do as a team. And those team members are a voice for their departments that they represent. So really everyone in our building has a so-called a voice at that decision-making table. So we would do this together. Good question, Joanne. Thank you.
Yeah. And so kind of summing up, where the team had landed was that you really wanted to stick with that deep learning and the connection to ruler and social emotion learning. So the team came up with the stance that students first need to feel safe emotionally, physically, socially, and mentally. And second, they needed to feel significant, that they're worthy and that their ideas are worth listening to. And thirdly, that they needed to feel a sense of purpose, knowing why they are here and what their that their contributions could make an impact. So using this as the guidepost to removing barriers to getting to that experiential learning and project-based learning for these purposes, that became the goal of the team. But they had to first understand why they weren't there yet. And this is an exercise we do all the time when we know where we should be, but we're not there. And we want to figure out what's the problem, what's getting in our way of doing what we know and what we have problem solved to be, you know, kind of our ideal state. So the 5 whys, it's a great tool. It's a great resource. It's called the 5 whys, but you might actually need to go through the question why more than 5 times. So the first thing you do is you state the problem. So Andy stated the problem for us, and he indicated that due to the restrictions from COVID, and running 3 learning models at the same time, they had lost some focus on their core tenets of experiential learning and problem-based learning. And did I sum that up right?
No, yeah, I think that's spot on.
All right, so Andy, are you ready? Let's see how your memory goes with this. So, why?
This is my favorite step here. So right away, I think our first why is that education in general has been turned upside down due to the pandemic and restrictions.
Why?
Well, I think when we think about those restrictions that have been in place, it's really about keeping our students safe and our teachers safe, yet having somewhat of a normalcy of education.
Why?
With regards to keeping.
So I get it. You've got COVID. There's pandemic. There's restrictions. You've got all these safety restrictions. Things are not what we used to consider normal. Why are they getting in the way of experiential learning and problem-based learning? What's the next why to that?
Yeah. So what we had to do, as knowing we didn't have the same, knowing that we were not going to reasonably keep pace with past kind of curriculum and scope and sequences, and just kind of adjusting for time. I think that experiential learning and project-based learning took a pause of how did it fit and where did it fit within instruction.
Okay, so I hear that teachers are fearing, or educators, leaders are fearing that. All right, so we know that we're gonna have to slow down because of these restrictions. So we need to keep moving with our curriculum, the more traditional pieces, and pause on the experiential learning and PBL. Why?
Well, I think this is very helpful and therapeutic. Thank you, Paula, by the way. I think it goes back which our audiences don't really know, is that 4 or 5 years ago, we went through a very similar process of fear of not sticking to what we know. And I think, unfortunately, we went right back to that fear of trying to kind of maybe go back to a place of what we kind of maybe quote unquote control, and that might be that whole scope and sequence piece.
So yeah, so 5 years ago, that's right. The teachers were really worried about, if we change to this project-based deep learning model, our test scores are going to drop. And we can't do that. That's not who we are. That's not what we're known for. We're known for high test scores. So there was this fear in the community that if we did this, it would result in poorer test scores. Our test scores actually went up when we made this shift. So why the fear again?
Which I think it can go back to not knowing how.
Mm-hmm.
I think not knowing how to do something that is big, and not knowing how to connect and make those connections with outside professionals, or not knowing how to kind of create those opportunities for kids to kind of group and collaborate with one another. Yeah.
And I think we might have just done this in the 5 whys, right? I think that we just hit it. There was this big fear of not knowing how, right? Our teachers really are very, very committed to education. They know what they're doing. They're proud of that expertise. And now they're in a situation where what they know doesn't make sense. If they just continue doing how they knew to do it, it didn't make sense to them yet.
Right.
They really needed to know how to make those connections. So we're going to eventually get to how we can address that. But let's move on. We've got like 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that I think we can particularly do this step really quickly.
Yeah.
So and I don't even think we need to walk through this, but let's talk about how you use this slide. All right, so now you kind of know your problem practice. You can define it. You've put a name to it. You kind of know what's getting in your way and your barriers through your 5 whys. And now it's time to start putting solutions in place. But before you put solutions in place, you really need to make sure that everyone understands that problem and feels the same sense of urgency. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that the right people, the right partners, and the right resources are at the table. In the past, one of the things that got in our way is that we had educators at the table. We didn't have parents. We didn't have kids helping us think about it. We didn't have community members thinking about it. And so what I suggest here is, when you're working on the step 5 with your team, that if you really want to build that sense of urgency and have a lot of diverse voices at the table helping you to solve for your problem, you need to really make sure that you have representatives from diverse families and diverse students, diverse teachers, leaders at the table. And you really need to analyze what resources you have and what ones you need, who your current partners are, and what partnerships are still needed. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory. For us, It was really making sure that we were co-designing with parents and students. That was big for us. We felt like we had the majority of the resources we needed, but we didn't have the right people at the table. And so that was really important. And we also had higher ed partners that we needed to bring on, because our parents needed to feel like we're doing the right things for students and we wouldn't be closing any doors. So just to give you a little insight into what we learned. So this brings us to our theory of action. So you said that, we were not engaging in PBL and experiential learning because of the barriers in place from COVID and the 3 models of learning. And you said that the significant reason for that is we just really didn't know how. Our educators didn't know how, leaders didn't know how. So when they came together, and you had the stakeholders at the table and you were saying, okay, these are our whys, this is our problem, and they worked on their brainstorm to come up with solutions, they came up with a theory of action, which was the next step that we asked them to do. So all of the walls, well, these were virtual walls, but we had these Padlets. And on the Padlets, we had people putting up what could be some of the solutions that we could use in order to get to where we need. So, Andy, can you walk us through the theory of action that was developed?
Yeah. So, so kind of going back on that plus minus delta, and one thing that we did see was that whole idea of leveraging technology as a tool of how to get towards those deep learning principles. So if we leverage technology, and if we have the other part is obviously time, right? Time is incredibly important. And if we have the technology and then the time to reimagine experiential learning, project-based learning.
I'm typing proudly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then it kind of goes to that. Then we will see. So if we leverage technology and if we have the time to reimagine experiential learning and project-based learning, then we will. And I think then we'll see part would be getting us back to our mission, not kind of losing who we are as a school and our identity.
So I just want to add one thing to the if we, just for the audience. That time to reimagine experiential learning in PBL required coaching and professional learning. So that was built in and baked in to that time piece. So we provided significant amount of coaching and expertise to help the teachers take what they had done in the past and reimagine what that would look like in the current constraints that they were facing.
Right. And another kind of, plus thing that I think for context for them is that we've, fortunately from a state adopted, professional development days. And not only as a district do we have PD days, but as a state we were given PD days. So we've actually gained some more professional learning, which we can kind of reshape and use to our advantage.
Yeah, and so if you are looking for a resource, one of the ones that we found that was most helpful is something called a synchronous sandwich, which is a model for PBL Lite that was developed and is readily available online. And we did have Dr. Jennifer Perrault come in and work with our teams via Zoom on that and coach us up on how to reimagine what PBL and experiential learning could look like in the classrooms. So I'm just going to move us a little bit quicker. So this is how we moved from crisis planning to reimagination as a first step. We have way to go, but this was our first attempt at doing that. And we hope to keep doing it because we don't want to return to the way we were. We want to take the best of where we were, the best of where we are now, and even beyond those two things, what we haven't even thought of yet. This is requiring us to continuously revisit. So we take our logic model, if we, then we create specific steps, and I'm sure you're constantly using SMART goals. So we create those specific steps, and then we implement them and evaluate them once again using the plus minus delta. And we ask ourselves, did we reach the goal? Did we improve? We do this on a regular 6-week basis, and we're constantly refining. We believe in the idea of failing forward. So every time we fail, we find something that we learned about ourselves, about our students, about our teachers, and we bake that into the next layer of do. So how is it happening? What's going on now? Well, we have a ton of civic engagement. Our students at the high school are running their own news show via Zoom and interviewing and getting involved in politics. There's one of our seniors, and he's interviewing the Secretary of State. We have Johns Hopkins. They're Zooming into our classes, and they're actually teaching our students K through 12 about COVID and what COVID means, and looking at mathematical models of growth in COVID and the scientific background of it. It's amazing to see them working with like kindergartners, these Johns Hopkins doctors, Zooming into our classrooms. We have our students telling podcasts about their lived experiences with COVID. We're connecting with our local indigenous peoples, our Pocono tribe. They're helping our 6th graders write a book for our 3rd graders to learn about local indigenous tribes. We have an I Create lab, and the students are engaged in making in a very deep way and providing solutions to our community. Our students are engaged in presentations and are engaged right here. They're doing some digital fireflies using microbits. We're partnering with other districts. Here are our virtual library book clubs happening through our library association and our school librarians. We're coding, so our students are engaged in Coding Week, and this year's focus is on social justice. We're getting outside much more than we ever have. Even though it's colder, we're out there even more, and you can see the students just kind of living in that outdoors. Students are still working on their innovative pathways, and we found new ways for them to connect with their mentors and in their fields. And now we're just continuing to gain data on where our work is doing well and the things that we need to change. And we're communicating and storytelling. So I'm going to end it here, but how are we using the model today? We're redesigning, rethinking, and reimagining education. We're connecting and collaborating across the globe. We're engaging our students deeply, and we're focusing on equity, inclusion, and diversity. And I thank you so much for your time, and I hope that the logic model might be a useful tool for you and in your organization for whatever your problem of practice may be. Andy?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Yeah.
Through Zoom, we haven't been able to meet in person. Rhode Island has a very high COVID rate, and we did in the spring when we were getting ready for this year as well. So a lot of this has happened via Zoom.
All right, that's like 12:30 on the spot. I mean, we can hang out for a little bit more. If anyone has any specific questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And
you also have our contact information. And we provided you with copies of the presentation and our logic model if it's a tool that you would find useful and want to use. Thank you. Okay. Do we stop the broadcast? I'm not quite sure how this works. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for your patience. I know we had some tech issues and hiccups, but I hope that this was helpful. Okay, I'm going to hit stop broadcast now.